On the 7th round, Finland faced Israel. Pretty strong team. Maybe not anymore one of the best, but still very strong. And Mikael faced Tamir Nabaty, 26-49. So very strong player and quite young. And yeah, G6, I think Tamir likes to play offbeat openings against low-rated people, because obviously you really want to win, but still it's quite rare for 2600s to play G6 against anyone really. H4, quite rare, but you know, also quite typical, especially in blitz. Like you just play H5 and hope for some action. Knight F6 stops the idea, and obviously B5. Black attacks from the other side, and black stops the white's H5 idea completely. Also, Bishop H6 is not possible. But there's a problem with this move, and that is that white could play Knight H3, Knight G5, and it's really annoying knight. Like sometimes black wants to castle queenside, and it's difficult with the knight on G5. And so white could already do it immediately, but he decides to castle, bravely castle, even though there's B5. B4, naturally, Knight D5, maybe not the best. Naturally you want to go forward, but here the problem is black managed to get black can latch on to the D5 pawn to help his development. And here his knight comes in, D5, maybe not recommended. Once again, opens the bishop diagonal and just pushes the knight forward. B4 is hanging, but it's very dangerous to take it because, I mean, there's already a bishop attacking P2, so most likely at some point the rook is coming to B8. It's just a bit dangerous to take it. Not very human. F4, and so this was Mikael's idea. He wanted to trade the aggressive bishop, but the disadvantage is that the knight is on G4 and it's eternal. I think Agopov was hoping that even though the knight is on G4, maybe it's actually not doing that much. I mean, at least at the moment, it's not really jumping anywhere. But still, if the queen ever leaves, there's like knight F2, fork in town. Queen F5, bishop C4. Once again, maybe a small inaccuracy, because the bishop on C8, the most natural square is on F5. So we could try to fight that move with bishop D3, but after bishop C4, it's not possible anymore. Rook E1, okay, attacking E7, but black doesn't care, typical grandmaster play. If you take it, black has a not too complicated tactic. Rook C8, Rook C2 is coming. The only move really is Queen C8. White has two rooks for the queen, but Queen A2 really decides that white cannot allow this. The queen is too active. So the pawn cannot be taken. Bishop E3 instead. Here Tamir thought for almost 40 minutes and just went back with his knight to H6. His idea is that he wants to move the bishop somewhere and just play knight F5 to put it in more aggressive position, and also on F5 the knight would defend the pawn on E7 and attack H4. Obviously he was calculating a lot of lines, but just couldn't make it work. And in the end, there's one line that Works for black. It's a really cool move. Sacrificing a whole rook. And then pinning the bishop. One way for white to continue, and also seems like the best way, is rook e2. Making sure that the white king can escape. Queen a2. This was the whole idea of the sacrifice. The queen is coming to a1. Also b3 is coming now. So if white tries to escape, then bishop c2. Not with the rook. Rook c1. And rook c4. This is why we didn't take the rook. And the problem is the queen doesn't have too many squares. Let's say queen b6, then queen b2, and the king cannot go to e1 because rook c1 is hanging, and there's all kinds of discoveries with the bishop. So white is completely lost here. And also, let's say queen b4. Then there's a little tactic. Bishop c2. Check. Check. Fork. Finally, the knight does something. And knight d1. Black is up a pawn and p2 is hanging, so quite good for black. But obviously all this was quite complicated, and rook sacrifice is not the most obvious move ever. And knight h6 also, I think, was computer's second best move, so it's safe, and it's just a safe way to play for an edge. Queen d2. White is preparing for future knight f5, so he puts his queen away. Also, maybe he wants to play knight d4. So black pins the knight. a3. This was another idea of queen d2. Pinning the queen. Well, black obviously doubles the pawns. He tries to defend. Rook c3. Maybe I could mention rook c3 is also was a move with the idea to give checkmate here. And the rook, at least to me, it looks active, but somehow this was actually not as good as the game move, rook b8. I'm not sure why. Chess is just complicated. Because after rook e4, the b4 falls anyway, so I would think somehow rook being active on f3 would be advantageous for black, but for whatever reasons, computer says no. Knight f5, king b1 first, because if a takes b4 is just a checkmate. b6, c3, maybe a small inaccuracy once again. Knight f5, another one. Seemed like a5 was the way to go. It seemed like knight f5 leads to some kind of tactical problems. Bishop c2 is one way, and a5 is now tried, but now the problem is bishop f5 is a big threat, because then the g file would be open for the black king. So the knight has to go back, but now f5, white suddenly gets some play here. So it seemed like maybe black wasted a little bit of time, and white managed to, develop it kind of like tempo. A takes b4, because black doesn't want to open the g file. And now the black king is also a bit weak. So white gets some counterplay. Rook f3, obviously white cannot take because checkmate. And because the black king is so weak, also the knight is kind of stupid on g7. Black decides, okay, let's just trade the queens, it's the safest way to go. And here there's some kind of error. Leeches shows rook b7, you know, some kind of funny business. But I think rook e5. But I think this is what this position happened in the game, rook e4. If you just ignore those errors, I think the rest of the moves were correct. And yeah, black is hoping that with the h pawn he will be still able to play for a win. And he actually can a little bit, but with precise moves, white is fine because he also has a passed pawn, even though not as advanced as the h pawn. King e5, and this is also another edge, typical edge in the endgame. King e5 is just a better king than king on e3. Knight f6, bishop just goes back, and here's the problem for black. If knight d5, king g4 drops the h pawn, so black takes with the king, but king f4 also almost as good as king g4. If h3, then king just goes back. King c5 is tried, but first white stops the h3 idea. And now king g5 is coming. Black tries knight d5, hoping for some kind of fork. But that doesn't happen. King g5. And with a little bit of calculation, white is completely safe. Bishop g4. The bishop is hanging, but the pawn cannot be defended. Black tries king d4 and plays on for quite a few moves, but in the end he decides he just cannot make any real progress. Obviously, the knight cannot be taken because of queen. The bishop just stays on this diagonal, and black cannot do anything about it, especially because white has the b pawn too. And finally, a draw was agreed. Interesting game. Tamir missed some chances, but you know, that's actually good to know. You know, even 2600s, 2650 almost, even they may miss some big chances. And if you just hang on, you can do well. Next we have Pekka Koykka versus Viktor Mikhalevski. The elo drops quite a bit, 25.59 for Viktor. Slav, the idea is that black wants to protect the pawn b5, so a4 stops that. Bishop f5, stopping e4. Knight e5. Black says, how about the trade? White doesn't want to trade, but at least black got the tempo with knight b6. And he protects his knight, so white cannot play a5. f3, e4 is coming, obviously. Black decides, okay, the knight is annoying on e5, so we have to force the trade. And there's not much to do for the knight. It cannot really go anywhere anymore, so finally he has to give it up. Bishop d7, a bit rare. Usually knight d7, bishop g6. Here too, the bishop is kind of stupid on g6, but yeah, I'm not sure. Somehow this is more common than what Pekka played. I mean, I guess here the bishop is really, really stuck on behind the lines. On g6, it was kind of like maybe doing something. And also, when you take the knight, maybe you have hope to play like c5 or e5. Anyway, still not so bad. Castles, queen b3. White could also castle because queen h4 white can just play f4 pretty safely. It's nothing, but queen b3 was tried. I guess playing for even more than castling. Queen c7, obviously now stopping the castle because of bishop h2. Rook c1. Knight b5 is coming. And black has to do something about it. Also, the white queen has to protect the... I mean, the black queen has to protect the knight on b6 at all times. So quite a few things black has to worry about, like queen b8, just queen b6. Bishop f4. So if now knight b5, then just queen b8. And here white cannot take the knight because the rook on c1 is hanging. King f2. The king is actually quite safe here because the only black piece that's attacking is the queen. All the other pieces are far away. So black found nothing else than just go back. And that obviously means the white king is safe on f2. e5, logical, blocking the diagonal and preparing like knight e4. But there was actually a computer way to open some lines. And that was with c5. Very unusual. Opening the x-ray attack for the black queen. There's nothing really white can do about it. If knight e4, for example, black can just take on a4. If knight b5, black just takes. And also, remember, the bishop was really stupid on d7. So black is quite fine with losing that bishop. If queen b5, there's queen d8. Queen is coming to d4, and if queen c5, knight f4. And if white takes the bishop, then here black just develops. Another really difficult move to see. For example, rook c5, queen e7. The pawn is hanging on d4 and queen h4 is coming. All these moves are not so easy to make, but you know, can't argue with the computer. c5 was a good move. Pekka tries another similar idea, f6. The difference is now e6 will be weak and the bishop is still stuck behind the lines. So it's just not as good. Obviously black cannot take because once again the knight is still hanging. Rook f4. Rook b4 to kick the queen out and also defend the knight. Rook d1, maybe not the best from white. Knight b5 seemed like it was finally a good move. Queen d8. So this is already maybe somewhat of a good achievement for white because the queen is blocking the development of the rook. The rook might wanna go somewhere like f8, then like knight d6, and there are some mating ideas already, like bishop h7, king h8, knight f7 would be checkmate. But rook d1 was played, also very, very, very natural. Going to the only open file. Rook f8, b3, queen b8, maybe a bit slow. Seemed like knight d5 was possible already. And e6 seemed like bishop e8 was kind of like fine. h2 is hanging. There's also like queen b6, rook takes b3 ideas. But Pekka didn't wanna allow this pass pawn. So he played queen b8. And now if knight takes, we take with the c pawn, and now we are completely safe. This was his idea. It's just a bit slow for black. Bishop c4. Once again, maybe not the best. uh, because now that white has played g3, f3 is a bit weak. So maybe white should have left the bishop on e4. But obviously, it's tempting. Like white is hoping to use the e4 for other pieces, for example, the knight. And here, knight e3 is not working. Black is hoping to win some more than exchange. Queen f3, but it's just rook d3, defending f3, and the bishop on d7 just falls. Pekka saw that, so he played bishop e8. Very logical. Also queen e2, maybe I should mention, it stops knight e3 nonsense. Bishop g6. Here it seemed like this was a critical position already. And bishop g6 is a bit too, like, it's a bit like just not doing enough. But yeah, these are already quite complicated. If white plays the same move as in the game, knight a2, I think b5 was the move to go here, if I remember correctly. Oh wait, no, not b4. Yeah, I was wondering. Yeah, because I think there's bishop d5. I think first check, and now b5. And the idea is that the bishop is defending c6. Not so easy to see that advance. And like c takes b3 is coming. And we have enough compensation for the exchange. Anyway, bishop g6 was played, knight e2, and Pekka played rook b6. I mean, this one is clear. This is not ideal. Like we didn't want to play like this. We didn't want to play like this. Seemed like here too, black was kind of like forced to give up the exchange and just hope for something. Because in the game, these pieces just, yeah, this is were too passive. They didn't do anything. They just got stuck there. The rook is not moving anywhere. The queen cannot move anywhere, like queen b8. Black is completely paralyzed. And yeah, Pekka just doesn't know what to do anymore. He just goes back. E6 is hanging now. And finally, white strikes. If c takes d5, then knight b5. Fork down. So Pekka took with the e-pawn, but now the e-pawn rolls and all the black pieces on the queen side. And yeah, white is just completely winning. I mean, the rook can finally move, but it's just too late, a bit too late. The rook is coming. King h7. Knight f5, and Pekka resigned. White will just take on e8 and play knight d6 and promote very soon. Also, I should mention that with knight f5, white is trying to go to an endgame, and then especially the rook cannot help. So yeah, another interesting game, but this time the result was not as good for us, you know. Can't save them all. Let's go to the third board game. Sampsa Nyysti versus Ilia Smirin, 2600 player. E6, somewhat rare Alapin version, but why not? I don't really know what's the difference to. What is the big difference? Yeah, it just seems like it's a very, especially now, it's just a normal Alapin. B6. I see this as that black wants to play for a win. He could just play for more normal ways, you know, trying to, I don't know, d6, knight c6. Play more normally. b6 is a bit slow. Queen c7. And here Sampsa just doesn't care that his pawn is hanging. He says, oh, come take it. I don't care. I will somehow use the c-file. Maybe attack the queen somehow. It seemed like this was actually the best way for black to play, but it is somewhat unnerving to play like this as black if you don't really know exactly what's going on. Still, at the moment, there's no easy way for white to attack the queen. Anyway, black just developed, didn't have the cojones to take the pawn. d6, a bit brave, because you know, once again, it's a bit too slow. Like black places a lot of moves on the queen side and then tries to open up the center. It's very, very, very brave. And Sampsa plays very accurately. First check, activate the bishop, then c4. And black is already in trouble. a6 was tried, makes sense. Trade some pieces. Rook b1, another natural move, but it seemed actually was not the best. And here Ilia just quickly plays b5. He just doesn't think for long, he just plays b5. And this is really this is a sign of an amateur, really. He sees that his pawn is hanging, so he defends it. Just, yeah, very amateurish, honestly. Yeah, it's like, I mean, your king is in the center and just you try to open things as much as possible. It doesn't really make much sense. Black would have closed the center with the d5, and now it's actually quite difficult for white to continue. D takes, c4 is coming. If white takes, then just bishop takes, and the bishop is really active. Black doesn't even have to take the pawn yet. He can just safely castle, and he has the bishop pair, and d4 is really weak. And yeah, this bishop is just a monster. Black is fine. And because of this, white had to play d5. But the bluff worked. Black cared about that pawn, and he got to play d5. And it's Black is in trouble here. Rook c8, another just a typical like. I feel like this is not like a grandmaster move, or you know, it's like it's quite a blitz move. He doesn't care about his king. Obviously, black. I mean, maybe Rook c8 is not so bad because he is already after d5. He's in so much trouble, so he kind of like has to continue the bluff, Kind of makes sense. And yeah, and it does work once again. Now white Sampsa repeats what Ilia did. Ilia is basically saying, I'm a grandmaster, your pawn is hanging, you have to defend it. And Sampsa opens up he releases the tension and takes on b5. And this helps black quite a bit. The move to go was just to add more pressure. Bishop a3. For example, if black takes, then e takes d6, knight e5 is coming. What can you do? If you take, then just d takes e6 and the bishop on d6 falls. So yeah, white was very, very close to just completely winning, like in just a few moves. Like this, bronze, not enough tension anymore. Rook c3, and slightly, again, like continuing the same plan, like, but this bluff is not as big of a deal anymore. Black could have went for an endgame. This is why we needed to have the pawn on d5. I should also maybe mention that if black plays e takes d5, then rook e1 is the killer. The e file is completely open. And yeah, this one goes to an endgame, and in endgames it doesn't matter as much that the king is weak, and rook b5 is not possible because bishop a6. Black is doing not so bad, but rook c3 was tried, and the best way to punish black was quite difficult to find. Bishop e4. Like here, black is defending the pawn. White had to play like a4. Not so easy to see. Just keeping the queen's on, at least for now, and keeping the bishop on f8 and the rook on h8 passive. When white took on d6, he allows black to develop his worst piece. Rook c5, another mistake. King d7. I mean, black tries to defend the pawn, but a4. Another mistake. Because after this trade, it's going to be impossible to defend the pawn on b5. And if, for example, like this, black cannot play rook c7, so the pawn survives. And if rook b7, then once again the pawn survives and white can play for a win. I mean, this objectively is a draw, but more chances than in the game, I would say. But rook a1 was Sampsa's idea, and you know, it's not so bad either. White is also up a pawn, but rook endgames are like the more simplified it is, the easier it is to draw. So it's just a bit easier to draw this than the other position. The king is like Sampsa was hoping that the king is like with the king being cut off, white would have winning chances, but the side pawn is quite difficult to promote. And the white king is now also cut off. Even if it was on h2, it would still be quite difficult. Rook g8 is kind of nice because black can even play like e4, let's say rook f4, king e5, rook f7, king e6 to force his way to the f-file, and then it's impossible to win. And white tries something, but it's quite difficult. e3, nice move, sacrificing a pawn, but king g4, this is the idea. There's not much white can do here. And just a repetition. Interesting game. A bit sad we didn't win this. Sampsa missed some key moments, but Sampsa definitely played better than Ilia, so half a point is not so bad. On the fourth board, Tero Kokkila faced Evgeny Postny, 25-57. So also quite strong, and became some kind of Slav, except white doesn't play d4, so it's some kind of English, some kind of hybrid. Don't really know, but both players are playing quite reasonably. Queen f5, somewhat rare, this kind of early check, but this is black's idea. Doesn't want to allow this strong bishop on p2, putting pressure on g7. So he wants to trade, and at the same time, queen is quite annoying on a3, blocking the a pawn, and also b4 is not possible. And yeah, it's quite annoying. So white could have also just played like the standard move, queen c1, and if black takes, then the queen on b2 is now well placed, and these pawns can move forward quite easily. But white took an a5, just really stopping p4 that it can't ever happen. Also, black might play a4. Okay, some trades. e5, interesting move. If knight f5, then just g6, and if knight g7, then knight would be trapped. Knight f8, I mean knight h6, stopping castling, but for example queen f8 should be fine. So instead white tries knight b1, kicks the queen away, and queen f8, because if like queen e7, then knight f5 comes with tempo, and if now knight f5, then just g6, so no problems. So knight instead goes to f3, and yeah, it's just a pretty equal position. No big problems for either side. Knight e4, interesting move. It's like black is trying to equalize. It was definitely not necessary, and not like the not the best move. But yeah, it's fine. And the grandmaster doesn't take, because this one would lead to too many exchanges. White is maybe a little bit better here, because he gets to control the d file. Like here, if black takes, then white is controlling the d file, so it's somewhat annoying for black. Instead, black can just wait and see how white makes progress, and it's not so easy. For example, rook d4, planning queen d2, black can take, and I mean, if rook d4, then now there's really just not enough pieces to practically win. So who knows, you know, GM might be able to do it, but it's quite difficult. So maybe he takes d4. But yeah, it's just like a lot of pieces have been exchanged, so not something you want to do against the lower rated opponent. So rook c1 was played to at least keep one of the knights alive. But now black is just quite fine. So we could say this is finally Tero has played a successful opening. Queen b2, maybe planning in really good situation like some kind of knight f5. I'm really like seeing that the rook is disappearing, the knight is disappearing, and there's gonna be some kind of weird checkmate. Also, if black plays a4, then white can even just take, and maybe rook b3. This was maybe his idea. And so black doesn't play a4, just controls the e file. Rook c2. I mean, the rook on c3 was also not really doing that much. Queen e5. So queen e5, just make sure there's no like knight f5 jumps. Okay, a5 is hanging. And c5. Once again, a5 is hanging. And here is where it gets quite interesting. Black could play something passive, going back to defend. But of course, you don't really want to do that. So black tries rook d5. Maybe not the best because it's not threatening anything at the moment. c5 is defended. Still, it's quite okay. I mean, it's quite active there. Maybe in some cases it can get to like g5 or h5 or something. White, of course, takes the pawn. f5. This is a mistake. But of course, it's not so obvious immediately. I mean, it looks aggressive, and it is. But it seems like it's just not really working. It seemed like the way to go for black was like g5 and h5 and g4, which obviously makes sense. But after f5, white played queen b4, attacking b7, and here Tero just miscalculated, just quite badly, and played g5. He could just defend it with something, queen e7 or rook e7, and yeah, it's just not so clear how white continues. It's hard to put more pressure on b7 because the queen is in front. Usually you want to do the other way, like rook on b2, queen on b1. But also if white starts transferring all the power to the b file, then c5 is hanging. So I mean, this is just quite clear. You can just sometimes you don't need to continue the attack immediately. You can just take a little break. And if f4 with some kind of ideas to take on e3, then the move is knight f3. Maybe this is something Tero missed. Maybe this was his idea originally, but knight f3. the idea is that now white can take, because here the knight would be hanging. And just rook e1, and there's a pin. The knight is not moving anywhere. And b7 is hanging. So this f5, f4 idea just didn't lead anywhere. Anyway, g5 was played. White just took. And like I just showed, knight f2. This was Tero's idea, but he just missed a simple retreat. White took, queen e3, double attack, but the solution is simple. Just knight b3, just defending the rook. But of course, for a human, it's sometimes quite difficult to see moves that go back, and especially the knight moves are quite famous. I myself, actually, I have played too many. I played too many knight moves that go back. I lost maybe quite a few games because of that. I don't know. I just like to sometimes play very passively. But yeah, after knight b3, there's nothing left. There's no attack. There's only a pin, but that's just not enough to do anything. g4 was tried, but after queen f7 it's clear there's nothing. And yeah, the queens are exchanged. g3, the white just takes. There's nothing. a4. And yeah, rook b2 was the last move. I guess Tero resigned after playing rook b2. I mean, g3 is hanging, and maybe rook a1 will happen. White will just promote. Quite easy win. I mean, it is a very easy win, not just quite. So Finland lost. Unfortunate, but also was the most likely result. Yeah, some interesting games. Yeah, what can I say? Typical result. The next rounds, I think I'm already so far behind in schedule. I cannot analyze all the 4 games. I really have to analyze just 1 game per round. Just get it over with, 2 more to go. That's it. Bye bye.